yesterday we learned the very, very sad news that the great Diego Maradona has died. He was 60 years of age. He was one of the greatest footballers of all time. And, of course, there was an element of tragedy in his life as well. But anyone who saw him play will never forget seeing him play. John Giles joins me now. John, he was unbelievably good for a long time, at a time too, when great players like him weren't necessarily protected by referees. He took a lot of a stick and he got a lot of kickings. But I recall Liam Brady saying, and Liam played against him, that he never threw himself down. He never feigned injury. He was really great, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was absolutely great. Well, absolutely great, Eamon. Yeah. Great. I'd be tempted to say, Eamon, he's probably the best of them all.
Yes.
Now, that's a big statement to make in football,
it is, yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
Because I'm talking about, Lionel Messi, Ronaldo, Di Stefano, Puskas, Cruyff, Jimmy Greaves I put in there,
yes.
Dennis Law,
yes,
Georgie Best.
Yeah.
And he had something that some of those lads didn't have in terms of doing it on an individual basis.
Yes.
He's the best carrier of a ball that I've seen.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And Messi does it in a certain way, and he can beat players, but this guy could do it from the halfway line.
Yes.
In other words, do it on his own. Even Messi depends on teammates, of course, but this guy didn't have to depend on very, very many teammates of what he could do. He could pick it up at the halfway line.
Low centre of gravity and strong, John, so strong.
Yeah, he was balanced. He had everything that was needed, Eamon, to be great in terms of what he did. Balance, space, control, a vision to see the pass at the right time.
Yes.
Which, now, a lot of great players have some of those qualities. They don't have all of them.
Yes.
I mean, Ronaldo, for example, is a great player and scores great goals, Eamon. But he's not that good at beating players. He's not taking them on.
Yes.
He got headers. Messi does it, and he can beat them in certain areas and then deliver the pass. This guy could pick it up on the halfway line and go right into the penalty box.
Yeah, and
I've never seen anybody do that before.
No, and one of that, just to take that example, in the 1986 World Cup when they played England in the quarter-final,
yes,
he got the goal, the hand of God goal, of course, but the second goal was from the halfway line against a great England, a very good England team, and he did beat 6 or 7 of them.
Luckily enough, now Peter Reid was the first one.
Yes,
and he really wasn't quick, and he was able to run away from Peter Reid on the halfway line with the ball.
Yes,
because normally when players are dribbling with the ball, they don't run as fast as somebody without a ball.
Yes,
but he was going away from him from the halfway line, then got to close quarters and did his stuff from there.
Yes.
I've never seen anybody, and he did that on a fairly regular basis, because I watched a documentary of him recently that's been on Netflix.
Yes.
And saw more and more of him even than I did in the old days.
Yes, and we should say to listeners that there is a marvellous documentary about Maradona with his glorious football and, of course, some of the sad things in his life, and it's on Netflix, and it's well worth watching, because he was a leader too, John. When he went to Napoli, they'd never won a Serie A, and they were in the south, which is a poor part of Italy. Juventus and Milan were the big clubs, and of course the clubs in Rome as well, the north. But he led them. He was a leader. They won 2 Serie A's, incredibly. Yeah,
he carried them.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And normally when I've often heard me say, you're as good as the players around you.
Yeah.
And most of the great players are. But he didn't have great players. And the point I'm making again, he could do it on an individual basis better than anybody else I've seen. The only one I could see comparing him in a certain way would be Georgie Best, who could dribble on his own.
Yes.
And do it on his own.
Yes.
And they had, Dennis Law playing, but Dennis depended on people around him.
Yes.
So did most people.
Yes.
But he was able to go to Naples and lift the other players around him. He was extraordinary in that sense. And that's why I would separate him. And it's very difficult to say who's the best ever, because you had Stefano and Puskas and all these great guys.
Yes.
But I would definitely be tempted to say that I would consider him probably the best of really great players.
Yes,
really
and
great players.
The Italian game at that time was where all the great players wanted to be, and many of them were. Graham Souness was playing for Sampdoria, I think, at that time. Liam Brady was playing for Juventus and Inter Milan. And to dominate that league and to take a team like Napoli and to lead a team like Napoli to 2 championships, amazing.
Yeah, it was great. He was great in that sense. Look, how you would test him against the other players that I just mentioned. It was Ronaldo and all these great players, Cruyff and Di Stefano, Puskas and that. I don't think they could have done at Naples what he did.
No.
And they were obviously great players, but he could do it on an individual basis. I mean, particularly he's dribbling and go past people. I've seen him doing it like years ago, but particularly in the documentary. But as you said, the England goal, the goal against England was a perfect example. He picked it up on the halfway line or inside his own half.
Yes.
Now if you look at even Jimmy Greaves was one of the greats, and Messi in recent times, Ronaldo.
Of course.
I've never seen them do that from that particular. Now they did other things that made them great, but he could do it. Like, he didn't need great players around him. He carried those guys in Naples. I mean, I'm sure they were good players, but he carried that team, and he was able to do it.
And to drive. I mean, I think we did that World Cup, I think, together in '86, and to drive the team from the position he played. I mean, he picked that ball up in the halfway line, and you'd have to feel that the only person in the stadium who thought, I can end up slipping this into the back of the net from 6 yards, that he was the only person in that stadium who thought that way.
The only person in the world, Eamon.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
That could do it. I'm talking about Messi and all these great players.
Yes,
and they couldn't do what he did, which separates them even from the great players, in my opinion.
And
I mean,
do it on the big occasion, John, when you really need it.
Well, when they won the World Cup in when was it, in
86?
86. I mean, if you look at the players around them at that time, I mean, they weren't regarded as great players. I mean, obviously they were very good players.
Yes,
but they didn't. They couldn't. I couldn't pick 4 or 5 of them out and say, well, these were great players as well, which helped him do it.
Yes,
they obviously helped him, but he was capable of doing it on his own, which he did. And that's, again, I'm only repeating myself. In my opinion, separates them from even the great players.
Yes, and there's an interesting comparison. In Argentina, they've announced 3 days of national mourning. The last time there was that was for Eva Perón. And before that, Juan Perón, who'd been the president, and they were populist heroes. The difference the Argentine people feel between Lionel Messi, who I yield to nobody in my respect for, the difference between the two of them was that Maradona was able to lead Argentina in '86 to win that World Cup. And Lionel Messi has never been able to do that. Now, that's I should qualify that by saying he may not have had the players, and we've seen Argentina teams, blow it, the temperament, difficulties. But for one reason or another, Messi's never done it. This is why people in Argentina, when asked, always picked Maradona as the great one. I think that's desperately unfair to Lionel Messi, but I can see why.
Yeah, in many ways I can't, but because Messi's such a great player, there's different circumstances. What's the manager? Any manager you have is good, as Maradona had at that particular time. There's lots of different reasons, Eamon. And then we know what Messi's a great player and doing what he's did. But what he did, Maradona, Eamon, apart from win the cup, this was the time around the British Argentine.
Yes, it was. The Falklands. War. Yes.
The Falklands War, as we know.
It had happened.
And what he did, Yeah, and what he did against England, you don't forget they beat England.
Yes.
It was England they beat on the way.
Yes.
And this was at a time where it was a very, very sensitive situation, where it was I mean, Britain were regarded as winning that particular war, which really hurt the Argentinian nation in a big way.
Yes, indeed.
So that's why he apart from his football, that comes into it in a big way as well. That's what he did.
Yes, I mean, people talk about the later parts of his life, and indeed, while he was in Napoli, he had an association clearly with the mafia, and he was taking cocaine. But men like him, they tend not to stay in and watch the telly.
I mean, they don't watch Netflix like I do. No, I think you do. But I think what happened.
Well, George was the same. You know, George. You couldn't imagine George saying, "Well, there's a great prime time on tonight," or we'll watch Newsnight.
No, but it was the circumstances they were in, and the circumstances in which they were born.
Yes.
You know, he came from a very, very, very poor background, as we know, very, very poor background, and went to Naples, where there was temptation.
Yes.
And no protection for him. I mean, a bit similar to George, in that George went to Manchester United at a time of the Beatles were coming on. He had no protection. Matt Busby didn't know anything about Georgie Best. He knew about Tom Finney and Stanley Matthews, who were the great players of the time. Georgie Best came at a time when Britain was exploding with young people going to discos and various things. And Georgie had no protection whatsoever. And I think Maradona would have been similar when he went to Naples. He would have been a simple lad in many ways, I mean, coming from a very poor background.
Yes, but...
And easily led. You know, temptation was there.
And when you leave your home place, as George did and as Diego Maradona did, you don't have the anchor of a family and an extended family to sort of give you somewhere to go and people to be with. You are actually alone. And of course, if you're such a great player, there's a loneliness in that too, isn't there, John? And you'd know that yourself. But you've been around great players.
Yeah, all players are in different circumstances and different temperaments, as we know. Like in my case, I went to Manchester United before Georgie Best, but I wasn't. Britain wasn't erupting in the way that they did in 1956.
Yes,
it was erupting in 1961.
Yes,
and of course there was a huge difference between Georgie Best and me. Georgie Best was a really handsome guy that could go into the discos and get all these girls. I didn't. I was too old to go into the discos at that time because I was 5 or 6 years older than Georgie Best.
Yes.
And Maradona, coming from his background, to go into, there's temptations there. Yes. Obviously, temptations for people like him who didn't know. Like in the early days with Manchester United, Georgie Best, going back to him again because they're similar. The temptation was there. Nowadays, when the young kids go away, Eamon, they're going into hostels.
Oh, yes, yeah.
You know, they're
different.
Properly looked after. They're not allowed to go like George. Georgie was on his own.
Yes, yeah.
You know, totally on his own. And I think when Maradona went to Naples and that, Eamon, he was on his own.
Yes.
He'd no protection in what he had to do. But luckily enough, as we know, he's been celebrated for being the player he was.
Yes.
You know, his private life was his private life, and it didn't end very, very well, and he ran into a lot of problems. But it didn't take away from the genius he was on the football field, that's for sure.
And the memories that he left us. Just before we finish, John, I should say, you've modestly not referred to it. You played against Maradona when he was a young boy in Dublin, at the Aviva, I think. He came on as a sub. When Ireland were playing Argentina.
Yeah, Argentina. Actually, I played against them on the year before, Eamon. They actually came, I don't remember them actually. Remember the League of Ireland team went to Argentina to play the international team?
I do, yes.
He came on as a sub that day. Actually, he wasn't picked. I know he wasn't picked for the squad. I think he was only 17 at that time. But the following year, he came on in the second half. And I remember him then. Didn't know who he was, hadn't a clue who he was. But I remember him getting on the ball on the outside of the box and coming onto his left foot and hitting a whopper off the bar, off the crossbar. But I didn't know who he was at that, only later on. But then it's funny, in many ways, it was much less memorable it was my last match for Ireland.
Yes.
So we forget about that, Eamon. But no, I didn't know who he was. I only heard afterwards. He was still very young, and he was only 18 at the time.
Yes.
That went on then to do what he did. He was unbelievable.
Yes, and incomparable, and left us, John, as I'm sure I know you'll agree, with memories of how great the game can be and how beautiful it can be.
Yes.
That will never fade. Never
fade. I mean, I still have memories of him doing what he did, as you say, that outstanding goal against England. So you can imagine what the people of Argentina felt and their feelings when he passed away.
Well, may he rest in peace. And John Giles, thank you very much for joining us.